Welcome, Browns fans. It's Wednesday night. It's time for OBR Weekly. So Fred and I are here to provide Browns information. Well, he provides Browns information. I just sort of hoist questions around. How you doing, Fred?
I'm doing good.
That's
Feeling
good to
good.
hear. An eventful day out at camp today for you, and a long day out at camp for you today.
Yeah, day 16, the end of training camp. It's officially over.
Oh,
And
okay.
yeah, so that this was actually the last day we're allowed to watch the entirety of practice because when they start up next week, it will be regular season mode, meaning get to see them stretch. And, you know, they redid their training room out there and they built a 3-deck training room. And the
Mm-hmm.
players used to come out, the injured players, and be on the field. And we'd see who was not working out or
Right.
not practicing. Now they put that in the building. It's right there watching practice, but that's considered the building. So we are not going to be able likely to report on who's not practicing unless they let us walk by and say, "Oh, we saw him on the bike." So
Oh,
they're
jeez.
getting sneakier and sneakier and so forth. But yeah, it was eventful today. Amari Cooper was back at practice. I can
Mm-hmm.
talk about what I saw. Pierre Strong left the field and he actually took an ambulance ride to a hospital. And I have the update on that. And Deshaun Watson did not practice at the end with when the starters were going against the scout team, which is usually what they do just before the game, the last practice.
Mm-hmm.
Jameis Winston was taking all the reps with the starters.
Right.
DTR came in and took the second reps, and Tyler Huntley did a few third. But so that led us all to assuming that Watson was going to be held out against the Seahawks, that they'd made a
Mm-hmm.
decision. We talked to Kevin Stefanski afterwards, and he said that's not the case necessarily. He said that Deshaun Watson has experienced some general soreness in his arm. Well, that could kind of be taken as a big deal when you took the whole off season to get to this point
Right.
because of his shoulder surgery. He kind of emphasized it was general arm. I don't know where your general arm is, but he said that it doesn't mean he's not going to play Saturday. And he said that there's no rush. We'll take it day to day. We got tomorrow, and then they fly out tomorrow afternoon to Seattle, a long flight. They don't play till Saturday night. So I expect some type of, if anything, an announcement through their TV channel before the game, or they may
Mm-hmm.
release a statement, but I don't know. Somebody asked, will you err with caution, not only because the soreness, but because of your tackle situation? And he said, well, we'll take everything into consideration. So who knows? That's a definite maybe.
All right. Well, with that information in hand, hopefully all the bettors are laying down the lines for this important third preseason game with a general idea of maybe some information in the future. So really good. Um, so yeah, general limited with a sore arm. We have no idea what that portends for Saturday night at 10 p.m. when we were supposedly going to watch the starters. In general, though, it sounds like a lot of the starters are going to play or should be, as Stefanski said, prepared to play, although he could change his mind if discretion indicates that he should,
Well,
right?
yeah. I mean, when you say that, okay, let's go down. Mari Cooper returned today, but I did not see him in the team reps like
Right.
when they were doing against. So I'm assuming Amari Cooper might not play. Jedrick Wills is definitely not going to play.
Mm-hmm.
Jack Conklin's definitely not going to play. Deshaun Watson definitely maybe play. Nick Chubb
Right.
is definitely not going to play. And so right there's 5 starters on the offense if you were, really
Yeah.
going to go with that. And on defense, I think more of them, but still Jordan Hicks hasn't practiced in 2 or 3 weeks. Denzel Ward has a concussion. That's another piece of news. It's confirmed that's his 5th since 2018. It isn't he was just in the protocol for any reason. Greg Newsom's not going to play. So you take that with a grain of salt when you're talking starters. You're talking about practice in training camp starters or who's been running with the first team. So you get to look at probably DeJuan Jones at right tackle and Jermaine Ifedi at left tackle.
Right. So we at least get to see DeJuan Jones play. What about David Njoku? Was he on the field today?
He wasn't. So that's another one that, he was on the field. He took part in the walkthrough we saw before practice in the morning, but he wasn't out there doing an individual.
Oh, Fred disappeared. It wasn't me. I didn't cut Fred off. He just vanished into thin air. But I assume he will be back shortly, assuming no one cut his Wi-Fi out there in the woodlands in which he lives. We've got a couple of questions or comments that we can start working in here. South Coast Bermuda says, I feel like we've covered a lot of the third stringers on the practice squad for the last couple of months, and that certainly is the case. I do not remember a preseason with less starter involvement than this one ever. Of course, the Minnesota Vikings practices were closed to the media or closed to the fans, so fans didn't get to see anything there. You haven't seen the starters in any other games. And it's been very unfortunate that fans just haven't had a chance to see much of anybody, right? And so when you do get a chance to see them, they're starting at 10 o'clock on a Saturday night, and there you go. So yeah, seems that way to me too, Sancho. You're back, Fred. Welcome back.
Yeah,
Welcome
I
back.
thought I had everything going good, and all of a sudden I'm talking to myself.
Well, that's all right. That's all right. You're talking to all of us now. So yeah, we were just going through the large number of starters who may not play, even though Kevin Stefanski is talking about having the starters play. Added to that group, obviously, we did see Conklin and Wills on the field a little bit today, which portends well for a couple of weeks from now. At least we hope so, right?
Yeah, all I can gauge is the way their sense of calmness to some degree, that they don't seem to be that concerned when it seems like a 5 alarm fire. If you got 5 of your top 6 tackles not practicing or injured. So it's hard to, go through the whole thing. We all saw Jack Conklin declared himself cleared, back before training camp. And yet he has been the least that we have seen. I mean, Jedrick Wills, even in Greenbrier, was walking around out there. Jack Conklin was never seen. Now, since the game against the Packers, he was out on the field at the stadium. He has now been more and more out on the field.
Mm-hmm.
I put a little clip of him. He was walking to the offensive line today. Seems to be walking fine. Seems everything there. Jedrick Wills has been out there quite a bit more. Saw him the other day working with trainers, kind of doing a workout. Hadn't seen that before. Today, Jack Conklin was seen with trainers doing a workout. So I don't know what that means. I actually thought when we got to this week, when we knew or thought Watson was going to play,
Mm-hmm.
I thought that Kevin Stefanski, or they would say that Jed Wills is going to start practicing this week and we're taking him off the PUP list.
Right.
But that didn't happen. He said he wouldn't be ready this week or whatever. So now you got to think next week, you got the roster moves on Tuesday by 4:00. It's a little confusing, but the one thing you have to know is they have about 90 players. They have to be down to 53. There's none of this whack-a-mole a few at a time. It's all or nothing.
Right.
They
Right.
can let them go whenever they want, and they probably will do some before. But by 2 or 4:00 Tuesday, they have to be down to 53. And they are allowed to name 2 guys on injury reserve, I think, that don't have to sit out 4 weeks.
Right.
It used to be if you didn't, you had to put even guys that were injured on the 53-man roster or you lost them for the season. Now you can declare 2 of them and they're not lost for the season.
Right.
But if you
Right.
put them on injury reserve, they're going to miss at least 4 games. So
Right.
what does that mean? Is Nick Chubb going to be a 4-game guy, or is he just going to be on the roster? Same way with Conklin, same way with Wills, a lot of these guys. There were 7 people on the PUP list or non-football injury. None of them have come off to date. So they got to do something with those 7 or just leave them on there. So, yeah, there's a lot to be answered. I remember, I don't know how many years it was ago, but when J.C. Treader was the center, Treader, I remember, had arthroscopic surgery, kind of like Tomlinson did,
Mm-hmm.
and he missed all of training camp. And he showed up. The first day we saw him was the first week of practice for the game. Like, if they played the next Sunday, we saw him like on Monday. And he practiced and he started. So if that's the case with Conklin and Wills, that'd be great. But it's hard for me to think that's what they'll do. I could see it be more apt for Jedrick Wills. By all indications, his injury didn't seem like it was going to be as significant as Conklin's. But his was much later than Conklin's. If you remember, Conklin was the season opener. So
Right. Right.
So anything could happen, but yeah, this week you just hope you get out to Seattle and you don't lose any more. They have a lot of injured players. I don't think a lot of them are serious. If you look at my notes today, I list everybody that's been out. The most recent to come back are Tony Fields and Rodney McLeod, but they weren't really considered much of an injury to begin with. So Jordan Hicks, we don't know about him. There's several key players that are still kind of iffy.
Yep. Well, a key one of those is Denzel Ward, as you mentioned, listed with his 5th concussion. Obviously, a big concern, for the Cleveland Browns, the number of concussions that Denzel Ward has had. Are you concerned about what this means for the player's career longevity, Fred?
You always are. I mean, the thing that's kind of concerning is he was wearing that big old Guardian helmet, when he got it. He just kind of fell to the ground. I guess he hit his head. And a lot of us didn't think it was necessarily a concussion because he was out on the field watching practice. And Elijah Moore was kind of in the protocol, but he never had a concussion. And so a lot of us thought Ward was kind of in the same boat. But today, Stefanski was asked about him if he did have a concussion. He said yes. So that would mean he's had 5. Now, we've asked Ward a few times. He said that he's done a lot of research. He's comfortable with the situation, and he's not worried that long-term, but who knows? If it keeps going, it's like, I don't know how many blows to the head you can have or how much protection
Right.
you can have, but I think it's the game of football. So yeah, it's always concerning for sure.
Absolutely. Um, so, as we get into this game with the Seattle Seahawks, we're finally seeing our starters. A comment from Pirate Johnny on X. He says, for the second week in a row, the Steelers starters are playing. Curious how different coaches approach the preseason. Last week, Andy Reid had Patrick Mahomes and Kelsey, in the game, for a while. And if you think if there's any players in the league you want to protect, those would be the guys. But totally different philosophy, Fred. Based on what you've seen over the years, do you have a particular way that if you were coaching this team, would you be running the starters out there a little bit more, or would you be as cautious as Kevin Stefanski is?
Well, I think that it would have been makes sense for this week to be the time because if you play in the first preseason game, by the time you get to the regular season, it's kind of ancient history, in my opinion. You want a tune up as close to the real thing because they don't play 4 games now. They play this weekend, and then next weekend's kind of like a bye because there's no game the next weekend. And then they play the Cowboys or opening weekends that following. So it's like 2 weeks still away. So I don't know how, sharp you get. You see, it's the age old question. You're watching these college football games or even the NFL teams get a bye and then they look flat by the time they play 2 weeks later. But yeah, you go out and you lose your key player, you're going to be second guessing yourself all the way around. So I guess at this point, think you, I think you run them out there to get the feel of a real game because there's something about a stadium, there's something about a crowd, especially on the road in Seattle. It'll be loud out there, even though it's preseason, I think. And go out there and play even a series. At least you get your juices flowing. You're not going to show anything anyway. The game's going to be played by your third and fourth stringers, after the first quarter at the most. I would at least run them out and do a little bit. They go through the warm-ups and all those kind of things. And then we talked about how important the practices are, controlled, like with the Vikings. Now, Amari Cooper and David Njoku got hurt in those practices, when
Right.
you're trying to control. So you can control all you want, but it is a game of contact, and a guy could run down the field and tear out his ACL, So it's
Right.
I don't know what the best way to do it is, but it sure seems like you want to get them to the regular season. At least you have a start if you have all your players there to start the season.
Right. Okay.
They have a long way to play themselves in. You want them to be available in December and January and those type things. And I don't buy that you have to get tough now in August in order to be ready for January.
Right. Right. Fair enough. Got a comment here from Mr. Dog Pound, and I brought along some questions from Ask the Insiders where we are seeing a lot of this about Jedrick Wills. Mr. Dog Pound saying, could Jed's issue be a low-key hold-in or a lazy rehab? Both are concerning. We have a comment from someone in Ask the Insiders basically saying that he is a guy who works in orthopedics, and the timeline is outlandish for Will's recovery. Why is it taking so long? I'm just curious, Fred, has anyone asked Stefanski or Dickerson about this? Why is it taking so long with Jedrick Wills' recovery?
Believe me, every week. The answer is he's working hard. He'll be out there as soon as he's ready.
Yeah.
That's the answer to
You
all
get
of
no
the
answer. Right.
questions. You have to ask them, but it's just not going to say anything. And they're not, as far as I don't think he's doing a hold in. I mean, this is a very important year for him.
Yeah.
This is a year he's getting like 15 million guaranteed for his 5th-year option. And so if he wants the big contract, he goes out and has a great year this year. Stays
Mm-hmm.
healthy, stays on the field, and plays as well as he can. And then it becomes a no-brainer. The Browns then sign him to an extension. There's no motivation for him to just monkey around. It
No.
is his demeanor. He is a very laid-back player, and they knew that when they drafted him. He was that way at Alabama. He's never been, this guy that's just like an in your face, aggressor. He just seems to play kind of passive and not aggressive and, doesn't seem to hustle. But when it's all said and done, you could have worse options, and we've seen worse options on
Sure.
this team. And doesn't mean they're looking for a long-term replacement, that they may have decided we're not going to go long-term with him. But right now, I'd say he's at least middle of the road, average left tackle in the NFL. He's not what he was drafted to be.
Mm-hmm.
If this guy was a 7th-round draft pick, I don't think everybody would be as down on the guy. But then
Right.
again, he probably wouldn't have been given all the chances he's been giving. So,
Right.
Bill Callahan kind of handpicked him and stood up with him, stood behind him the whole time. And Andy Dickerson still does. And Kevin Stefanski, the front office, they picked up his option, or they, wouldn't have, they would have saved that money and went for another option in the draft. They didn't really even draft a tackle. They drafted a guard.
Right. Right. Okay. Well, let's get to some of these other questions that we have here. This one from Kelly Black asking, will the Browns keep 7 wides or 2 tight ends? I haven't answered that question, but I'm interested to hear yours, Fred.
Well, I started going through my projections. A lot of it's a little bit with health. They said David Bell's a week to 2-week injury, so I assume they wouldn't put him on injury reserve. They keep him. I could see him keeping 7 wide receivers and 2 tight ends. It's hard for me. I think Gio Ritchie is versatile enough, and they signed him that he was going to be kind of a tight end fullback.
Right.
He got hurt. He's going to be out multiple weeks, so he could be an injury reserve candidate. So that opens up kind of the 3rd tight end. I just don't know if they feel they need to give up a roster spot for Zaire Mitchell-Payton or Trayton Welch. Now, I saw a guy today, I think the Eagles released C.J. Uzama, a veteran tight end. That's the type of move I would make. I would bring in a veteran tight end. If they don't like him, there's going to be other tight ends that they might like that could be a 3rd tight end, or trade for one with one of your positions of depth. So
Right.
a lot of it's the injury situation, but yeah, I really think Thrash is going to make the team because he's a draft pick and he's had a good camp.
Yeah.
And I don't think they're ready to give up on David Bell yet. I think your top 4 wide receivers are entrenched with Cooper, Judy, Moore, and Tillman. And then it's 5, 6 with Bell and Thrash. And then, beyond that, I don't know. I don't know if they'll keep Michael Woods. He's had a good camp. He would be probably the 7th to me. James Prochet, they use him in special teams, but I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up being on the practice squad, because when it comes down to this stuff, there's almost like a game they keep guys on the roster that they think they have a better chance, or I should say, they waive guys they think they have a better chance to get through waivers and to put
Right.
back on the practice squad. A guy like James Prochet was on the waivers when they got him last year from, he was cut by the Ravens, so the draft picks, a lot of them just don't get through waivers because other teams had him on their draft board fresh in their mind. They go, oh, we like that guy. Let's take him. So I don't know if they'd keep 7 wide receivers, but if that was the option, 7 and 2, I'd do that over 6 and 3, because I think Richie, if he's out multiple weeks, they're not going to, I don't think they'll put him on the 53-man roster. They'll put him on injury reserve for 4 weeks.
Right. I personally think the answer is 6 wides, 2 tight ends, and 3 quarterbacks. I think that's where your third quarterback comes from that's on the roster, by sacrificing that third tight end and keeping.
Well, nobody gave me that option.
It didn't give you that option. I'm going off the board.
There's going to be 3
I'm
quarterbacks.
redefining the rules.
There's going to be. Yeah,
and that means you're giving up a position somewhere else, and I think it's tight end. I just don't think.
Yeah, and here's the other thing: the Nick Harris move. If you remember last year on the depth chart, by the end of the season, they listed him as a starting fullback. So what you have in Nick Harris now is a backup center and a backup guard, and that could cause you to free up a spot at the guard position, because Harris is going to be the backup center, take Whippler's spot, and also be a backup guard, and also can be your fullback. So whether that could end up be like what I'm saying, Gio Ricci gets put on injury reserve because you have a built-in fullback type. Harris isn't a tight end, but I can see that being the way they go there. And Harris could even push a guy like Michael Dunn off the roster or into injury reserve, because you drafted Zach Zinner. He's going to be on the team. I don't know if they think he's the backup guard right now, or you have the dual purpose with Nick Harris. He can be your swing backup guard, and then you have Zinter.
Right. Hey, a helpful tip from Brad Ward, who is going to be on after this show with his own show called The React, which is awesome. So you have to stay online to watch that. But he suggests that you hit like and subscribe. He is writing from YouTube. So if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit like and subscribe. That is very important to us, because it helps us grow our channel, which we have to do because we had to start over with our channel this year for reasons that I won't go into at length here. And Sancho Bermuda wants to know if Barry, with an A, so meaning me, had his own jersey, what number would he pick? I would pick 83, because in 83, I was 22 years old. The future was in front of me. And therefore, I think that 1983 was the height of civilization. Music was great, because I was young, and I thought all music was great back then. So 83 would be my number. So there's your answer right there. Kind of weird, but my answer.
Plus, you have a wide enough chest to make it 2 numbers fit. You wouldn't look good in a number 1.
No, that would look very strange on me. I am a large human being. Let's face it. Hey, if I want to be a fit large human being, the people I would talk to would be the folks at Core Home Fitness. You can find them at corehomefitness.com. And I mentioned them because they are awesome, because they sponsor this program. They are also awesome because they make the top-rated adjustable dumbbells on planet Earth. You don't have to take my word for it. As always, take the word of the experts who are out there at places like Consumers Reports. People who have worked with them, who have commented on our shows while I talk about this equipment, say that these are awesome dumbbells. They really are the top of the line. Check out their other videos and their other products at corehomefitness.com. They've got a US-based support team, fast shipping, hassle-free returns, you name it. These guys know what they're doing. They sponsor the OBR. We love them. You'll love them too. You'll love their products. Bring the gym home. Hit your fitness goals. Make sure that you can wear a one jersey without looking ridiculous, unlike your favorite web dork. And go to corehomefitness.com. All right. So we have a lot of comments that I want to get into here. Guys are talking amongst themselves about the readiness of this team once we get to the regular season. So let me bring up this comment here from Sancho Bermuda. Sancho says, let's talk about Watson a couple minutes on the field, off the field. These are the biggest years in Browns history. I don't know if they're the biggest year in Browns history, but certainly in the modern era, this is our best shot at the Super Bowl since the late 1980s, and it all relies on Deshaun Watson. And as much as I joke about them treating him like a delicate Hubble figurine, during the preseason, your very first, I've got it written down here, Fred, you wrote going into training camp about the 10 storylines that you would be focused on during training camp. And number one was about Deshaun Watson, right? With a good reason, because everything hangs on his performance this year. And you were hoping to see some things from him in training camp that would start to indicate that he was ready to return to that Houston Texans 2020 form. And so my question to you is, did you see any of that during this, 16 days of training camp?
Well, I mean, to me, check the boxes. He was out there. He didn't have a setback, barring today. And I just take Kevin Stefanski's word for it that he said that he held him out. It wasn't Watson. He said he wanted to go. So, no, we saw in the offseason, he threw every other day, got to training camp. Today was day 16. He checked the box for every practice he threw, except the one day of scheduled rest. He didn't play in the preseason, so we didn't really get to see him in game action, but we saw him against the Vikings. He didn't have the greatest blocking, and it's true. If they were tackling, he would have been sacked, but he did make throws down the field. And I just have to assume that he'll have better blocking when the season starts. He'll have better players there, better scheme. But it's all about him. And there's been some things like slow to make reads. The whole idea of this offense with Ken Dorsey was to tailor it to what he did best in Houston, which was quick read and react and get the ball out quick. Since we haven't really seen game situation, it's just been practice situation. You're going against your own team. The closest was the Vikings. I think there were some good moments there that he got the ball out and he looked pretty good. He got the ball down the field. So I can't say that I'm 100% sure that he's going to come out of the blocks firing on all cylinders, but I think that gets to that point, season opener healthy, with basically one box to check, which would be the Seattle game. If he played, even if he played a series, to me, that would check the box, and now you're full steam ahead in the season. Nobody's going to remember the preseason, even in September. Nobody's going to say, hey, man, I remember that tough loss to the Packers. It's like nobody cares.
Right.
You care about what he does. And what I said way back in the offseason, this whole season is about Deshaun Watson. They've got a really good defense. They're bringing back the same guys. There's no reason this defense, they might not be ranked number one, but they're going to be competitive and they're going to be able to keep the opponent down. They're going to play a lot of good quarterbacks, but I think that the defense is good enough with the players they have that they can hold the opponent in the 20 range. Last year, they gave up about 21 a game. Even if they could just be about 20, I think the offense should be able to score 20 or more a game. You got a great kicker who can kick from over 50 yards. So that's on the offense. Ken Dorsey, Deshaun Watson, and this offense to put up points. And I really feel that if they're on the field, we saw enough signs last year. The last I saw Deshaun Watson, he looked pretty good. He was 14 of 14, led the Browns to a comeback win over the Ravens, who the last I knew were probably at that time the best team in the AFC, when the Browns beat them. And he looked good, and he was injured. He had a broken bone in his shoulder, and he had a high ankle sprain. He still looked pretty good. So I'm optimistic that he's going to play well, but he's got to be out on the field. If he plays the whole season, I think there's no question the Browns will make the playoffs. And even if he just plays average or a little above average, if he's in the middle of the pack rankings, I don't care. I think they can still make the playoffs. But for the Browns to go where they want to go, he's going to at some point have to get to more of a top 12 type quarterback to border elite play. Because as we know, this is a quarterback game. You saw the Jets last year. Aaron Rodgers goes down, their season's over. Joe Burrow goes down, the Bengals basically, their season's over. You could say that with Lamar Jackson 2 years ago. It's about the quarterback. The final 4 teams in the NFL last year in the playoffs all had their franchise quarterback. So Deshaun Watson's on the field at the end of the season. I think the Browns will be in good shape. If he's not, if he has another injury-prone season, then all bets are off. I don't know what you're going to get. Jameis Winston might be able to do better than Joe Flacco, but I don't know about that.
Right. Well, I'm going to put up another quote here. I just briefly put it up a second ago from someone who I can relate to, who probably can relate to me, because sounds like a warrior, and that's Serge MDC. He says if Watson doesn't play Saturday, he won't have taken a live game snap since November 12th, 1923, and he'd just be okay to play well? I'm concerned. I mean, that is a really long layoff, Fred. How important do you think it is for him to get a series or two of snaps, or do you think that's overrated because he really had that against the Minnesota Vikings in those practices?
I think he needs a series or two. I would put him out there, but to me, I was fine not playing the first 2 preseason games. The Vikings was like, that was what they wanted, was the practices. So you have 2 weeks till a game. Let him get out there. Like I said, go through all the practice, go through the, get the crowd, get under the lights, just get that off, knock that off your box level that I got in a game, got some plays under my belt, even if it's just handing the ball off. If you're worried about him getting hurt, then just have him hand the ball off and not even throw,
Right.
Hand the ball off and run backwards, like you're doing a fake. I don't think if you get hurt doing that, then there's no hope. So
Right.
No, I think you can protect him. If you want him to throw a ball, have him throw a flanker screen, or if you're worried about the tackles, don't let him drop back in the pocket, or go out in the first play and throw the bomb,
Right.
I think there's ways to do this to get him a little bit of game action, but protect him at the same time.
Right. And Serge is likewise concerned about the tackles because, with the exception of DeJuan Jones, we haven't seen them all year, and then all of a sudden they've got to go up against Micah Parsons, and everything's got to be hunky dory. But very similar concerns from this user on Twitch. He says he doesn't want any rust excuses this year with Watson. I expressed similar concerns in the newswire. I don't want to hear that this year. They had plenty of opportunities to roll him out there during the preseason. He's a slow starter. We all know he's a slow starter. Not playing him certainly sort of leads right into that, but we'll see how it goes. All right, from Kevo680. He says, Andrew Berry's a pretty aggressive GM, doesn't like to sit on his hands if there's a problem. If we get the worst news on the tackle situation, what's the likelihood of a bold move? What is the worst news on the tackle situation, Fred? It doesn't seem like Conklin or Wills are going to be out for an extended period of time, does it? That doesn't seem like a likelihood.
Well, let me just tell you here. Just because Kevin Stefanski says they're working real hard and I don't know, we'll know when they're ready. They know where they're at. They know if they're going to be ready. I don't think they're just sitting there going, boy, I hope tomorrow's the day.
Right.
If they're in that situation, if they're really counting, and hoping just every day that, oh, today I hope the trainer says he's good to go, they have to know. And by the lack of aggression, I mean, the only moves at tackle have been like Chim Okafor, or somebody that's never played in the NFL as a first-year player. There are veterans out there, like I've talked about this, the 30-something guys for the most part that, they didn't get signed in free agency at all positions, linebacker. Last year, Shelby Harris was one of those guys. He's now a prominent guy that they brought back even for 2 more years. But they have a list of tackles. They're expensive, but they could go get one. They're not going to – I don't think they're going to throw the season away and just on the hope that, out of the blue, Jedrick Wills or Jack Conklin – appear one day and go, I'm ready to go. I have to think by the way they're not stupid. I mean, they're not telling the media, and that doesn't mean they don't know what they're doing.
Right.
Now, if it's the other way, if, I know last year, I think it was Wills that got hurt and they didn't put him on IR because they thought that it was like a 3 or 4 week injury. And then all of a sudden they said, well, he had surgery and we put him on injury reserve. So I would think if there's something going wrong with him, they would say, yeah, because what else is there? I mean, you just wait. Usually if something's not healing, it didn't heal right, you need more surgery or something to get something fixed. So I think they feel that Wills will probably be back by the regular season. And I have to think that Conklin wouldn't be too far behind him. Part of me wonders, they're paying Conklin a lot, but do you really want to put DeJuan Jones back on the bench? He played well as a rookie. And you'd almost feel like you'd need to put Conklin right back in. So he's been out so long, it'd be a lot easier to just say Jones is going to start and we're going to work you back in, maybe in a rotation or something. So, I just think that, as he mentioned, Andrew Berry, they didn't get this roster together just by accident. I don't think they're going to, just like with Amari Cooper, they weren't going to let him torpedo training camp with a holdout. They got that done. If they see a problem, they're going to get it done. There's more options now, I think, to make a trade, or there has been for a tackle, than in the middle or the end of the season. Last year when everybody's banged up, they didn't really have a lot of options. They're signing Jaron Christian, who wasn't on a team, and he came right in and started. You know, they didn't even put the guy on the practice squad in the game. They put him in the game. So
Right.
there has to be some options that they would look at if they don't think Jedrick Wills is their best option here.
Well, we have a couple of theoreticals for you because our chatters are not giving up on the offensive tackle question. And so they've got, they're like you guys going at Stefanski, right? They're going to ask the same question a couple of different ways to try to get the answer. And here's a theoretical from Drew in Brick City. He says, if Wills is not ready week 1, but Conklin and Jones are, who starts where? I think I have the answer on this, but I want to hear it from you, Fred.
Well, I mean, one of the viable theories was that they would try Deshaun Jones at left tackle during training camp, you know, since Wills is out, to see maybe if he could be your long-term left tackle. But last year when Wills got hurt, they kept Jones at right tackle, and, you know, then they went out and got Garen Christian. And this year they've put James Hudson over at left tackle, and he has only started at right tackle in games. So they have him listed as their backup left tackle.
Right.
So for whatever reason, it seemed like from Greenbrier early on would have been the time to experiment with Deshaun Jones at left tackle. It doesn't seem like they're wanting to do that. Conklin's coming off a big injury. He's been an all-pro right tackle. I don't know if they're going to throw him over at left tackle. You know, somebody asked the other day, would Joe Bitonio go out there as an emergency left tackle? Because he did that, you know, one time and did pretty well. That's why all points signs to me is that Wills is going to play. If Wills doesn't play, they probably go with Jermaine Ifedi. He's going to start this week at left tackle. He started last week at left tackle. So he's got like 83 starts in the NFL at tackle, you know, but they're all at right tackle. So, you know, you brought him in. It's hard to know what, you know, when they say they're going to rotate guys around, we haven't really seen much rotating around when it comes to Deshaun Jones. We see rotating around with like Hudson and Ifedi and Adeniji, but anybody's guess, you know.
I'm in total agreement with you. I think left tackle is, you know, the best left tackle on that current depth chart. Whether it's Ifedi or Hudson or somebody new that they bring in, and they don't mess around with Conklin and Jones. And I suspect it's Jones on right tackle because they, as you suggested, bring Conklin in a little bit more slowly, start rotating him in a little bit more slowly. I don't think they, as Marty suggests here, start experimenting with moving Jones to left tackle because they would have started doing that last year. If they were truly interested in that, I think they view Jones as the right tackle of the future. You know, it's just as simple as that.
Yeah, I think in their world, I think the long-term answer is Jedrick Wills at left tackle and Deshaun Jones at right. A lot of people don't want to hear this, but Jedrick Wills is like, I think he might have just turned 24. He's 23 or 24. He's very young. And I think they're confident that the light bulb will kick on with him at some point, and he'll get better, you know, than what we've seen. So I can't explain why they haven't had him out there, but I do think that just by their lack of, I don't know, urgency tells me that they do not think it's as dire as everybody. I mean, it sounds terrible when you say your top 6 tackles, 5 are injured, you know, right now. But Deshaun Jones isn't injured, and he'd probably be, you would consider him at least third. And Conklin and Wills, if they come off PUP here in the next 2 weeks, then you really have your top 3 tackles back. And that
Right.
was your goal to begin with. You not only have your starters, but you got a really heck of a good backup.
Right. Well, let's zoom out to the 50,000 foot level. A question from early in the show from Sancho Bermuda. And he wants to know any thoughts, big picture, with the Browns in general as we get ready for this final preseason game and head into the season. Owner, GM, head coach, quarterback, etc. How do you think the Browns are set up heading into this season, Fred? You know, we know it depends on Watson, but what is your state of the team as we head into as we finish up the training camp and all that?
Well, injuries are so big, all the way around, not only with the Browns, but it around the league. But this division is so strong. I've said it many times. You can make a case for any of these teams to be 1, 2, 3, or 4. They could finish, any of them could finish first or last or anywhere in between. And all you have to look at is last year. Joe Burrow goes down. I think a lot of teams would have thought the Bengals were the best team. He goes down. They get fourth place in the division. They still had a winning record, though, I think. And, it's just such a tough division. You play 6 games in the division. It's kind of a bloodbath. You're going to knock each other out. And a lot of this is by attrition. But the big picture is this is the best roster the Browns, I think, have ever had. They improved from last year's team. And they got a good defense. They're solid all the way around. Offense, they have a lot of playmakers. I mean, the jolt that Nick Chubb can really put into this offense at any point. I don't know when that will be. Receivers, they've upgraded at receiver. Quarterback, is he going to play like they want him to? So they have some factors outside their control. There's probably 8 to 10 teams you could say in the AFC right now that might be considered playoff, type teams or Super Bowl type teams. There's so many more in the AFC than there are in the NFC. That's what's kind of the problem. So it's a dogfight. You got to find a way to get to the playoffs, and then it's like a tournament. Anything can happen on any given day. I mean, it really comes down in the playoffs. You could play Patrick Mahomes, and maybe that day your quarterback outplays him and you win. And so that's what it comes down to. Almost all those teams, there's not much difference between any of them once you get to the playoffs. You just got to get there, and it's so important to get a home playoff game. That's why it's so important to me to win the AFC North. You win the AFC North, you get a home game. And last year they were 8-1 at home. You think about going down to Houston on the road, and that was a disaster. Would that maybe have not happened to a rookie quarterback playing in front of the dog pound, in Cleveland? So, that's why it's so important. So I really think they could do anything this year, but it's not going to be a cakewalk for sure because there's so many other good teams. It's kind of like I compare it, I might be a little biased because I haven't studied all of history, but at least in Cavs history, those were the best those 4 years the Browns or the Cavs went to the NBA championship were the best teams in Cavs history and might have been one of the best teams in NBA history. But at that time, the Golden State Warriors had probably the best team, and so you're playing them 4 years in a row. You were kind of fortunate to win one of them. But if you would have taken them out of the picture, Cleveland might have won 3, if not 4, championships in a row. Browns are kind of like that now. You got so much competition with the Bengals and the Ravens, not to mention the Chiefs, the Texans, Bills, all these other teams. So big picture, stay healthy.
Yeah, that if that was under their control, that would be nice. I personally think the state of the team is sound. I really like the GM and the head coach. I think they're both very smart, young, talented individuals. The owner is staying out of the day to day with the team, which is the job of the owner, is to hand off cash and invest in the team and stay out of the day to day, which the owner is doing. He's more interested in these little real estate transactions that he's planning on executing over the next few years. And, everything hinges on the quarterback, right? If the quarterback stays healthy and he bounces back to his 2020 form, everybody looks brilliant. If they don't, it's going to take a little bit more time for them to look brilliant. But overall, I think we're in pretty good hands with the Cleveland Browns. And I think in the long term, this team is going to wind up looking pretty good. So with that in mind, I think we're going to start wrapping up because we don't have any more questions from the chat room hanging in there. Sancho Bermuda asks, another show next Wednesday. Yes, we are going to have another show next Wednesday. We will be back again next Wednesday night at 7 p.m. To talk about the adventure in Seattle and to talk about the roster. This will probably follow a special show on Tuesday night where we talk about the cut down to 53. That is just in the very preliminary planning stages, but we may do a special show on Tuesday night to cover the cut down day to 53. And then Fred and I will be back here on Wednesday night to talk about all the adventures of the Browns over the course of the last week. Does that sound fair to you, Fred?
Yeah, I was going to say that roster cut down next Tuesday at 4 o'clock will be big. And we know it always changes. But last year, the Browns made very few moves. They only claimed one player. So it's very tough to make this team. They're going to have guys that they release that are going to be scooped up by other teams because this isn't the Browns of old. They have some good players on this roster that aren't going to make the team just because they probably have 40, 43 roster spots set before they really even started training camp.
Right. That happened last week or this week. They released Matt Landers and boom, he was gone. Within 24 hours, the Patriots snatched him up and probably feel very proud of themselves for doing so because he might be quite a find for them.
But they don't need Brandon Ayuk anymore because they got Matt Landers.
Exactly. Who needs Brandon Ayuk when you've got Matt Landers? Absolutely. But at any rate, we will be back here next Wednesday at 7 o'clock. Stay tuned for the React. Great show with Brad and Pete where they react to all the craziness that's out there in the world of Cleveland Browns talk. Definitely stay tuned for that. Fred and I will see you again next Wednesday. Thank you to Core Home Fitness for sponsoring us. We'll see you all next Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Good night, everybody.
See y'all.